Hello, everyone. This is the Video Game Frog coming at you from the swamp. And today we're going to talk about the Game Awards, specifically the Game of the Year award, because I don't want to bore you going over every single category, the games that were nominated, and why I think that Expedition 33 did deserve every award it won. I'm just going to focus on Game of the Year, and I'm going to talk about each nominee, and I am going to kind of explain why I think these games didn't win over Expedition 33 and kind of some of the problems I had with those games this year. Now, full disclaimer, I truly believed Expedition 33 was going to win Game of the Year the second I finished the game after it came out. I have thought it was a very obvious winner throughout this entire year. I did not think a single other game that came out was going to be able to compete with it for Game of the Year or really any other category except obviously audio, which Battlefield 6 had great audio. It has great audio design, and Arc Raiders, despite the use of AI voiceovers, generally has some of the best audio design I've ever seen, and I think they got snubbed. Anyway, on to the nominees. So let's start off at the bottom of the Game Awards website here with Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, which is certainly not an indication of how deserving it is to be a nominee. I think Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 might have been the second best game released in 2025. Now, a lot of people online are upset that KCD2 did not win Best RPG, or feel like it got robbed by not winning at least Best RPG and should have won Game of the Year over Expedition 33. I have seen a lot of people say that it's a more pure RPG, that JRPGs aren't real RPGs, that if they go up against a WRPG or a CRPG, it doesn't count. That I think is a very incorrect mindset to have. There has long been a narrative in this industry and discourse among gamers that JRPG games are somehow lesser than the other forms of RPGs. And this mindset only persists in the West. And I hate to pull this card, I really hate it, but I feel as though there is an inherent racism against JRPGs because they come from Japan. And anyone that's been following this industry as long as I have remembers the years, specifically the 360 PS3 era, where JRPG games and Japanese games in general received over the top lower scores across the board because of bias towards Western games. And this existed somewhat into the PS4 generation and has started to finally recede, but now it's starting to rear its ugly head again because a JRPG won Best RPG over a WRPG. Now, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is a great RPG. It's one of my favorite games of the year. It's really good. But a big problem here is that a lot of the people that are sitting there glazing it, saying E33 didn't deserve to win anything over it, are people that didn't even like the first game. They are people that would not play the first game today because it is janky in more respects than KCD2, despite having the same formula as KCD2. In fact, I would argue that KCD1 was an even more quote unquote pure RPG than KCD2 is. But you didn't like it then, you like it now. Why do you like it now? Because the developer changed it to appeal to people that didn't like the first game. And that compromises it. And that compromise bleeds through in subtle ways that you might not always be consciously aware of. Secondly, to pretend that a JRPG doesn't actually have you role-playing is completely disingenuous, especially Expedition 33, which does the absolute most genius thing I've ever seen a JRPG do, or really most games do. I don't think I've experienced this in a game before, in that if you immerse yourself into it and you don't go into it with a cynic's eye and actually try to get into the experience, You end up with the same information that, and here's a spoiler alert. By the way, spoiler alert. If you haven't played E33, don't want to be spoiled on it, turn off this video, go play it right now because you're about to be spoiled. You have the same information that Mael has throughout the entire game. And if you get into the game, you end up adopting her mentality. And that is why the choice at the end of the game is so impactful and mind broke so many people. Because so many of them started meshing their personality and their thoughts with the characters. And they started role playing as Mael without even realizing they were doing it. And that is what her ending represents. It represents you being so lost in the role of Mael in the world that you've become enamored with that you refuse to accept reality for what it is. It is one of the best role-playing games ever made. I have never played a role-playing game before that actually manipulates the player into feeling and acting the same way as the main character. It's beautiful. People don't understand it. And that is why it deserved Best RPG. Not because you were literally in the character's shoes and going around the world and they tried to make the world immersive from a first-person perspective, but because they used the narrative and the storytelling as a way to get your mind into the same place as Mael, who is actually the main character of the game. It's incredible what they did. It deserves Best RPG. Absolutely. Moving on, we have Silksong. Now, I like Silksong. I think it's a great game. However, Silksong is just Hollow Knight that's bigger and harder. It's not breaking new ground. It's not giving people an experience they've never had before. It's not revitalizing a genre or revolutionizing a genre. It's just a very good game. It's not a special game. A lot of this game is special that people attach to Silksong is because they are Hollow Knight fans and they have waited so long for Silksong that they were always going to love Silksong. Most of the people I see complaining that Silksong should have won Best Art Direction or Game of the Year or Best Indie Game are always people that have been obsessing over Hollow Knight since they played Hollow Knight. Just because you're in an echo chamber does not mean that Silksong was a groundbreaking video game. It wasn't. It's just a very good one. And the same thing can kind of apply to Hades 2. Hades 2 is over-designed. It's just Hades 1, but with a bunch of other stuff bolted on to give it more depth. But adding things and creating more depth isn't always good for a game, you guys. Making something bigger and more can sometimes detract from the core experience that made the original game so great. Hades 1 revolutionized roguelikes because of all the dialogue and interactions you could have and how smooth the combat was. And then in Hades 2, they make the combat way more complicated. They add way more interactions. They over-design all the characters. And they basically just go balls to the wall with Hades 1. And you might think, well, that's good, right? We want more Hades. Yeah, but you want more of what made Hades 1 incredible without detracting from it. You don't need to overcomplicate things. You don't need to make a time travel narrative that doesn't really make sense and cheapens everything you did throughout the game. Hades 2 isn't better than Hades 1. And I think Hades 1 deserved way more praise than it got the year it came out, too. And I know it got glazed a lot, and I think it deserved to be glazed more. Hades 2, I see as a downgrade. I didn't enjoy Hades 2 as much as Hades 1. I didn't think it was doing anything special that Hades 1 didn't already do or do better. In fact, I think it did a lot of things worse. I think the combat is largely worse. Yeah, it's deeper, it's more complicated, you have more options, but that's not always a good thing. Really great games take simple game concepts and expand them and make those simple concepts feel deeper. They don't overcomplicate things with systems. And that's a problem that Hades 2 has, is that it introduces more systems without actually making those systems better than the systems they replaced. So no, Hades 2 didn't deserve to win because it's got sequelitis. It's how do we make the game, but we make it better. Maybe you can't make the sequel better, guys. Maybe you should have just stuck with Hades and then gone on to a new IP. Maybe sequels aren't that good. Maybe sequels sap creativity. Maybe sequels cause you to lose what made the original game so great and so interesting, because all you're doing is trying to expand on something that maybe doesn't even need to be expanded. Next, Donkey Kong Bonanza, which, I mean, it's great. It's a great game. I think Donkey Kong Bonanza, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and Expedition 33 are the most worthy Game of the Year contenders out of the whole list, guys. And Donkey Kong Bonanza is not a sequel. In fact, it has a completely unique gameplay gimmick of feeling sort of pseudo open world. You can go after the bananas in any order you want. The levels are almost fully destructible. You can be creative in how you get to your objectives. However, something in level design is lost in that way. There are some levels that are really good and really cool in Bonanza, but overall, it's not coherent in the level design so much like Mario Odyssey or Mario Galaxy were. And I think that's the thing that holds it back, is that, yeah, this is really cool and it's really unique and absolutely worthy of being here, but it has a really glaring flaw in the level design department, unfortunately. However, it's a really good game. I love Donkey Kong Bonanza. The only reason I don't have Donkey Kong Bonanza footage playing for you right now is because I don't have a capture card yet. I can't afford to get a capture card yet. So maybe one day I will be able to afford to get a capture card, and then I can show gameplay of the console games that I play. However, that's not the case right now. Donkey Kong Bonanza, though, is really good. Death Stranding 2. Now, Death Stranding 2, I have a lot to say about Death Stranding 2. I actually love Death Stranding 2. That game is very special to me personally because I played it after suffering a personal loss while I was grieving. And it resonated with me very deeply in that time. However, and I think this is important for gaming discourse in general, it is extremely important to separate your personal subjective emotions from the actual objective merits of the game. And Death Stranding 2 objectively detracts from what made Death Stranding 1 so special. I love Death Stranding 1. I thought I was going to hate Death Stranding 1. I played it to clown on it, and I ended up loving it, and it's one of my favorite games. It's in my top 10. Easily in my top 10. No question. It's so unique. It's so well thought out. It's so well designed for what it's trying to do that it proves that, yeah, Kojima is a visionary, guys. He is one of the few auteurs in video games. He is a real artist. And that is the problem with Death Stranding 2, is that Death Stranding 2 detracts from what made Death Stranding 1 good in order to appeal to people that never liked Death Stranding 1 in the first place. Most of the people glazing Death Stranding 2 and talking about how it should have won Game of the Year or won Best Direction or Best or whatever, they are people that did not even like Death Stranding 1. They only like Death Stranding 2. Yeah, but Death Stranding 2 gets rid of all of the uniqueness of Death Stranding 1 and replaces it with the ability to just use your truck to go everywhere. You can shoot anyone. Most people don't even know you couldn't even just kill people whenever you wanted in Death Stranding 1. You had to actually dispose of their corpses, which meant picking them up and carrying them to an incinerator, which who knows where that incinerator is, depending on where you are in the game. That could be a trek in and of itself. And you're on a timer, because if that corpse decomposes, then it will void out and cause a game over. Whether or not you're trying to carry it to the incinerator, it will decompose and cause a void out. So you have to actually really consider what you're doing and whether or not it's worth it to actually kill someone in Death Stranding 1. Death Stranding 2 is basically just Metal Gear Solid 6. Now, that's great fun. I had a ton of fun with it. But it factually is a lesser form of Death Stranding 1 in order to appeal to a wider audience that did not accept the original vision of the first game, did not like the original vision of the first game, and does not want the original vision of the first game. And those same people turn around and go, well, I don't understand how this didn't win. Well, it was because it took everything that made the first game special and unique, ripped it out in order to make you happy. And what did that end up for Kojima? How did that end up for Kojima? It ended up with him not winning shit. Because he compromised on the art in order to appeal to people with no respect or admiration for it. That's what happened, and that's why it didn't deserve to win anything. No matter how much I love Death Stranding 2 for what it meant to me when I played it, it's a lesser version of Death Stranding 1. It is all flash with very little substance. You have to intentionally handicap yourself throughout the entire game in order to get anywhere close to the same feelings that Death Stranding 1 gave you. And even then, you still won't get it because you always know in the back of your mind, I could just get in the truck. I could just shoot all these people. I could just play this like Metal Gear Solid and it will work better. Because that's how the game was designed. It wasn't actually designed to be like Death Stranding 1. It was designed as the antithesis to what people did not like about Death Stranding 1. It was designed to appeal to critics that ended up not rewarding him anyway. That's the crazy part about it. And now we come to Expedition 33, which is one of my favorite games of all time. It is an incredible video game on every level. Anyone trying to say that this game is slop or it doesn't have good art style or it's not a real RPG or it's not even that good or it's just derivative of all those that came before it are completely missing the fucking point. You have a small team with under $10 million that made a game that rivals AAA video games that had hundreds of $millions invested in them. That absolutely trounces them in terms of gameplay, in terms of writing, in terms of audio, in terms of art. It completely trounced them on a shoestring budget with nothing but hopes and dreams. And it told it didn't even tell, see, this is the thing. It didn't even tell really a new narrative. This story's been told before. You've probably are at least familiar with similar stories as the story of Expedition 33, but the way they executed it, the way they get inside your mind, the way that they manipulate the player into falling for the same traps that the characters fall for, is brilliant. It's genius. It's something like that you don't really see anymore. None of the other games on the list are really sitting there thinking about the player's immersive experience and how to draw the player in and utilize all the different disciplines that go into making a game together in order to create a more cohesive whole that feels like it's greater than the sum of its parts. That's what Expedition 33 did. It is greater than the sum of its parts. It is a pure video game made with passion and love and blood and sweat and tears that wasn't made to be a sequel to capitalize on the success of a first game. It wasn't made and compromised in order to appeal to a wider audience or to games journalists that wouldn't like it in the first place. It wasn't just tacking things on to another game in order to make it seem deeper. It wasn't over designing itself. It was a truly good video game made with passion and vision. That's why it's so special. That's why people are so crazy about this game, you guys. Because it genuinely is that good. It genuinely is that special. None of the other games it was up against are special games. They're good games, great games even. But none of them are landmark special games. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 isn't a landmark special game. It is a sequel of a good RPG that was heavily underrated by everyone else, including the people that glaze KCD2 the hardest. Silksong is a great game, but it's just more Hollow Knight. Hades 2 is a good game, but it's just more Hades. Donkey Kong Bonanza is genuinely the only other game on here that is actually unique. It's actually a unique experience to play Donkey Kong Bonanza. Death Stranding 2 is not a unique experience. It's a lesser Death Stranding 1. Hades 2 isn't a unique experience. It's a lesser Hades 1. Hollow Knight Silksong isn't a better... Is it really even better than Hollow Knight? I know there's a lot of controversy in the Hollow Knight community over whether Silksong is actually better than Hollow Knight or not. KCD 2 is just more KCD 1, but more casualized. And the same people that complain about the casualization of gaming appealing to a wider audience will sit there with a straight face and glaze the very games that sacrifice parts of themselves to appeal to people that didn't like them. That's why Expedition 33 is the best game of the year, because it did not compromise, it did not waver. It had a vision, it executed on it, and nobody on that team actually knew if anybody would appreciate it. And thankfully we did. Thankfully it's gotten the recognition it deserves. That's all I have to say on the matter. Leave comments if you disagree, leave comments if you agree, and like and subscribe for more.